Okay, so welcome to day 9 of math history, and what we're going to do is, before I move on, we're going to talk about the Arabs today, but before we move into that, I want to make sure we have one more thing on our map. Last time I didn't have my map with me, so here we go. This is where we've been so far. We've got Babylonians over here, we've got Egyptians in here, we've got the Greeks in there, and I stuck the Romans on top of Italy, just so we could see that. So there's the Roman Empire, although they didn't do much for us. And then along with the Roman Empire was Constantinople. So that's the one that I actually want to get in here. So if we have the Mediterranean Sea here, where Italy is and the Egyptians are, and this other over here is the Black Sea, then about halfway in between those two seas is where Constantinople is. So, and that's modern-day Istanbul, I mentioned the other day. And the reason why it's significant for us is because that was the place where Constantine set up shop, so to speak, as one of the rulers, one of the emperors, away from Rome. So Rome was over here, and Constantinople was over here. So he was ruling the eastern half of the Roman Empire, and he named his city after himself. And again, the reason why he's important, even though he wasn't a mathematician, is because he stopped the burning of the textbooks. And who knows what else could have been lost without his assistance. So we truly appreciate you, Constantine, for doing that. All right, so today we're going to go on to the Arabs. Moving on into the Arab nations. And what we're going to do, so most of the time, whenever we're talking about that, we're talking about people in what we would consider modern-day Middle East, okay? We've got this Arabian Peninsula here, and we're going to talk a lot about that today, because we're going to talk about Muhammad, who's actually our second non-mathematician who made great contributions into math history by doing what they did in their own lives. So it really helped us in a lot of ways. So we'll talk about that. But just realize that we're talking in this general area here. It's really a large area. And in general, in your textbook, they just call that the Arab nations. So be aware of that as we talk. Okay. So we're going to discuss Muhammad. He's our main figure for today, I think. And of course, the name can be spelled in different ways. I've seen it spelled multiple ways. He is the founder of the Islam religion. He's born in Mecca. The dates that I have there are 570 to 632, and I'm going to put AD, but we can tell by the way I'm writing them now, right, that these are all AD, and from now on will be after the time of the death of Christ, right? So it'll be more modern looking dates is what we're going to see. Yay! Okay, he was born into a trading family. Unfortunately for him, his mother died at the age of 6. Well, or maybe fortunately. Okay, so his mother died very young, and he was orphaned. I'll stick that on there. Okay, he was orphaned. And so at a very, very young age, what happened was he became a camel driver. Because he had to kind of support himself, had to work. And so he became a camel driver, and he was in caravans, driving trading items, whatever it may be. It could be salt, or it could be olives. I don't know what it was, but he would be driving a camel in a caravan. So he was working, and what happened was, while he was doing this, while he was still in the trading areas, it said that he was able to see through his travels all sorts of varieties of religions, and he was able to see all different walks of life and the way that people acted and the way that they treated people. And he was interested in the different religions, because he saw that some religions would worship rocks and stars, and he wanted to know why. And he saw that some people didn't treat people very nicely, and he wanted to know why, so he started questioning those things. And then what happened was he married a wealthy widow. And this was nice for him because she was wealthy. It allowed him to spend his time thinking about religions. Oh, excuse me, bless me. Sorry about that, guys. Couldn't stop that. Spent his time concentrating. Oh, goodness. On religious beliefs. Okay, so he's spending his time working on religious beliefs, and he's learning things, and he's really struck by the variety of what's going on around him. So in his mind, Mecca was a place of worship. So let's get that on our map. Not only was it the place where he was born, but it was a place where a lot of people came to worship. And in fact, there's a stone there called the Kaaba, I believe it would be said. Kaaba. It's a stone in the middle of Mecca. And it was one of the things, I guess you would say, like an idol where people would go to worship. So it's in the middle of Mecca. And Mecca is, so if we're looking at the Arabian Peninsula, Mecca is about halfway down on the edge here, so it's right on this waterway. So it's clearly a trading hub, right? Because it's right on the waterway that leads out into the ocean. It also leads into the Mediterranean Sea. So lots of people passing through, lots of walks of life. So that's where he was born. Unfortunately, it was also a place of merchants because of all that trade. And it said that he didn't like that. Muhammad did not like that it was both religion and merchants. The mixture of religions and different merchants and practices that were going on. Okay, so he didn't like that. Was not thrilled about it. So what happened was that he wanted to do something to unite. There were a lot of Bedouin tribes, Bedouin tribes, that he had visited while he was trading. But they were sectioned off. They were in different areas of the countryside, and they weren't working together. And so he wanted to unite them. And he wanted them to believe in what he considered to be the one true God. Okay, so he thought that instead of worshiping different idols and different stars and rocks and whatever, all things they were worshiping, if he could just get the word out about the one true God, that he would be able to unite them into a unified front, basically. He believed that he had divine revelations that were sent to him from, divine revelations sent from the one true God, and that he thought that his God was a compassionate God. So he didn't like the way people were treating each other. He was not a killing God, as some people portrayed him to be, and instead that they should have mercy. And so he wanted to share these beliefs with his friends and with the different people. So he felt that Christianity and Judaism, the Jewish people, had distorted the truth of God. For instance, in his mind, Abraham and Jesus were prophets. They were not the Messiah, as many people believe Jesus is. They were not the people that should be being worshipped. They were just prophets, and they were sharing the word of God. And he thought that he, Muhammad, was the last prophet. So he knew exactly how things were supposed to be going. And so what he formed as his religion, he said, look, we need to care for the poor. Everybody should have one wife. So think about what you know of Bedouin tribes. Those are the ones that we would think, oh, the man had a harem and those kinds of things, right? So Bedouin tribes is what we're talking about. And he said, no, that's not acceptable. You should have one wife, and that should be the person that you are you're dedicated to. He thought that no children should be killed. Now, for us, that probably sounds normal. We wouldn't take a kid and take them out and kill them. But what happened was, in that day, if a child was born with a birth defect, and it was determined that that birth defect would negatively impact the quality of life for that child, if it was going to put a burden upon the tribe, that kind of thing, then they would take that child out and kill them rather than have to provide for that child. Maybe if they were lame or something like that and they couldn't keep up with the tribe, then we're not going to keep that child alive. So that was a practice that was going on at the time that Muhammad was establishing his religion, and he said, no, that's not civilized. Which today, of course, we would probably all agree with that. But in that time, it was a very common practice. So he's kind of bucking the system, so to speak. So sometime in 622, he was starting to preach his religious beliefs, and he was starting to create his new religion, and he was starting to get a little bit of persecution. So people in Mecca didn't necessarily appreciate, for instance, the merchants didn't really appreciate that you're telling me that I can't be doing business in the middle of where the Kaaba is. I don't appreciate that. I'm doing what I want to do. So he was being a little bit persecuted, so he fled to Medina, which is in the north. And not really very important to our story, except to know that he had to basically abandon Mecca and move north. And that's actually going to open us up for other places being important in his religion, including Jerusalem. So that's what's going to happen there. Okay, so this is what's going on. As he is establishing his new religion, which we all know is the religion of Islam, and people who believe in that religion are called Muslims. As he was establishing this religion, he said, look, we're going to destroy these pagan idols, okay? So we are not going to worship the stars and the destroyed pagan idols. We're not going to worship rocks. We're not going to worship some fountain in the middle of the desert. We're not going to worship those things. Instead, we're going to worship the one true God. That was his goal. Okay, and a single God, just one, not lots of gods running around there. So, interestingly enough, though, even though he destroyed the pagan idols, the Kaaba stone stayed. And it's actually a central point in today's religion of Islam. So it's a place where people go to worship still yet in Mecca. So this one big stone in the middle of Mecca, I don't know why. I don't know why that one got to stay when others got destroyed. But this one stone, perhaps because it was in Mecca, perhaps because it's something that he grew up with, but that one got to stay even though others were destroyed. So that's kind of interesting. And in fact, if you were to go to Google and look up a picture of Mecca, like either an aerial shot or maybe, I don't know, I haven't Google Earthed it, but if you were to do some, and for sure I've seen aerial shots of Mecca, and you can see this stone. It's kind of a protected area. I think there's even walls around it, but you can see this stone in the middle of Mecca, and you can see that people are there to worship at it and pray at it and that kind of thing. So in general, Muhammad was establishing a very peaceful religion that believed in not killing a bunch of people and not cheating on your wife and things like that. All good things that we would love today. But unfortunately for the religion of Islam, Muhammad died. Okay, so after Muhammad died, Islam had spread so much. It was uniting so many of the Bedouin tribes, but it had spread so much that it formed what's referred to the armies of Islam. Okay, so you'll hear people talk about the armies of Islam and them invading and stuff like that. That normally, for the most part, did not happen while Muhammad was alive. Instead, what happened was he died, and then there were so many people who were in this religion that they had to rule it from different areas. So there were these... I don't want to say it was a split. It wasn't a split. It was more like we're one giant country and these are states, so to speak. So different areas were, I don't want to say ruled, but basically that's what they were doing. They were ruled or they were controlled or run by something that ends up being called caliphs. Okay, so these are the people who are now they're interpreting the works of Muhammad, and they're telling the armies of Islam what they should do. All these people, and there's so many of them that what happens is they send them out to start conquering. Okay, so after Muhammad's gone, they start conquering. You see in historical fact where they went to places like Mesopotamia. Well, we know that that's the area that was where Babylon was, or the Babylonians, right? So Mesopotamia, Syria, Arab areas, right? Persia for sure. But even Egypt, as far away as Egypt. So again, we're talking people who are here in Mecca. Up here, one of the places that ends up being an important site is Jerusalem. I'll put a J there. Up here, it's right on the Mediterranean coast, not a little bit more than halfway down on this eastern side of the Mediterranean Sea. So Jerusalem's in there, and what happens is that we've got people, caliphs, who are sending out their armies to conquer, and the idea is we're spreading the religion, okay, we're going to spread our religion, and so they're sending them into the Mesopotamia here, into what's generically called Persia, up here into Turkey, and over here into Egypt even. So you're starting to see not only is Islam spreading because it's kind and people want something that will unite them and they'll have common beliefs, but now we're starting to push out with the armies of Islam and conquer. So they're taking over places like Egypt. As they do that, they encounter again, just like the Romans did, places like Alexandria and the library. Okay, so If I'm a bit of a zealot for the Nation of Islam, for the armies of Islam, then, and I look at the library and I see things that contradict my religious beliefs, they contradict the Quran, which is basically the book that all of my beliefs are written in, right? Then I see this stuff, maybe it's about, I don't know, astrology or something like that. I'm going to get rid of that because it goes against my religious beliefs. So they start, what do you think? Burning books. Okay, it's always about the burning of the books. So yeah, there's yet another sacking of Alexandria, another burning of libraries and different things. And so it's almost as if when they go to Alexandria, I think in your book it says something to the effect of, you support the Quran with what's in your writings. We don't believe you because you're a heathen, so we burn you. Burn that book. Okay, because we don't need the support of people who don't believe the way we do. Okay, you contradict the Quran. Well, you're just a pagan, you're just a heathen, whatever, so we're going to burn that book. So it kind of comes down to, it doesn't matter whether you're for or against the Quran, whatever is in these writings, if it's not the Quran, we're going to probably be destroying it because we just don't believe in those things. So we've got a lot of book burning going on again, but a lot of spread of the Islam religion, the religion of Islam. Okay, it becomes so large that we have to govern, like I was saying a minute, almost like as in states, separately. Almost like there's states inside of our big religion. So this is where Baghdad is founded. This is when, I should say, Baghdad is founded. That happens in 766. It's actually on the Tigris River. So somewhere in the area of Babylonia, I'm going to put a dot right there. I've got another B. That B stands for Baghdad. And I've seen it with the H and I've seen it without the H. So however you want to spell that is fine. But I've got Baghdad coming in right in the middle here. So there's this area in Baghdad. And what happens is there's a caliph there who's kind of ruling this particular state of Islam for lack of a better word. His name is Al-Mansur, Mansur, Al-Mansur. Okay, and whenever he is in charge, he actually believes in an intellectual area. Okay, maybe we shouldn't burn everything. He creates a library of his own, and he wants scholars there. And he's trying to figure out how to get that to happen. He establishes something, well, it's actually a different person that establishes it, but in this area, we start bringing in scholars. And where are we going to bring in scholars who know a lot of different things, maybe mathematics or this or that? So he brings in people from the academy, and he brings in people from the museum. So a lot of these are going to be more Greek-based mathematics and things like that. And when he brings these scholars in, what do they bring with them? They bring their books. Yay. Okay, so they bring books and texts and things like that, because those are the things that they're studying, right? Different documents that they bring with them. Now, the thing that happens, though, is that anything that comes in, because we are looking at the Arab nations, these things become translated into Arabic. And really, this is how we end up with the Arabic numbers, because as things get translated into Arabic, which is like the language of the Quran, right? which is the way we want to do things if we are in that religion. We want things to be in our language. So they start translating things, and it's really, really, really important. So I will say this, mark it off, because this is how we preserve Greek texts. Okay, so this is how some really important things get translated. It's said that by the year 900, there were many translations of really important Greek works, such as Euclid, what was remaining of Euclid's work, Archimedes, what was remaining of that, and so on. Okay, so those important ones right there in particular are really, really, really important to us that they survived. And the reason they survived is because of the religion of Islam and the spread of Islam. And that is why we give Muhammad some credit, because he was just doing what he wanted to do with the religion, but it really helps us out a lot. So later we see the scholars are supported, which we haven't seen that a ton. We saw it at the museum, but they become supported. Possibly that model came over because of the museum. Who knows? We don't know that for sure. Something interesting was that one of the focuses for us here in the area of Baghdad is math and medicine. So medicine's kind of a new thing that we haven't studied in the past, but you know, maybe we want to study the human body, and maybe we want to look and see how this herb can keep you from having a headache or whatever. So they start studying actually scholarly study of medicine is what we're talking about here. And there is a place that is established here. It's called the House of Wisdom. And it becomes actually a first-rate university is what it turns into. Like one that would rival universities in England or wherever. And this one was actually established by a guy named Al M-A-M-U-N. I'm going to say Mammon, maybe. So he is the one who actually establishes that, and it's actually very beneficial for us, because one of the things that starts happening here is that people start looking at numbers just as numbers. Okay? So this is where we start seeing taking a number and just manipulating it. Who cares that it's a square root? Let's just do something with that and see what we can end up with. Finally, because we're translating things into Arab, we start seeing Arabic numbers. And what happens is that the scholars see these things. We've got 0, 1, 2, ... all those whole numbers, all the way up to 9, these digits that we can use. We have a base 10 system. Finally, we start seeing that. Yay, base 10. We all love base 10, right? So we can get away from anything Babylonian or anything like weird Greek alphabet stuff that's going on in our numbers. And we can start using, look, we've got a 0 for a placeholder to represent the concept of nothing, which is really, really important. And we have this lovely base 10 number system where once we get past 9, we can just move over one place, and it lines up nicely with our fingers and toes. And so we all say yay for the number system, the Arabic numbers, because as we've seen, a lot of the problems with early mathematics was notation and being able to write things like fractions and so on and so forth. But just think about how easy it is to write the fraction 1/9 now that we're in Arabic numbers. as opposed to what the Egyptians might have done with a 9 with a dot on top of it, right? And don't even make me draw what a 9 looks like in Egyptian. So, you know, the fact that we're moving forward, the fact that we have this lovely, lovely notation, we have this concept of 0, yay, 0, and it has its own notation. That's amazing. Okay, these things that start happening for us, really they start happening because of the spread of Islam. Okay, so it might have happened sooner or later. I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened sooner or later, but the mingling of those religions and cultures really comes out because of what's going on here as some of the Greek texts become translated into Arabic. Another thing that happens here with the base 10 system is that all of a sudden I can represent numbers of any size, right? So if we want to talk about 30 million, I can do it, which is awesome. Some of the procedures that we want to do for adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing and things like that are just way more manageable. So operations and procedures are more manageable in the Arabic number system. That's for sure. It just wouldn't have been possible to do some of the stuff we do nowadays, say in calculus or whatever. We probably would have really, really struggled to do some of that stuff if we were doing stuff in Greek letters, for instance. That would have been a problem, right? Okay, so issues. All right, so I want to talk at least about one of our Arab guys tonight. So I'm going to talk about Al-Khwarizmi, and he's a guy that I'm just going to say his name, depending on what book you're looking at and where you're looking, he'll have his name spelled, I've seen it like probably 5 different ways. So please forgive me if this is not the spelling in the book that you have. Al-Khwarizmi. That's the way I was taught to spell it, but I've seen it with O's. I've seen it without the H's. I've seen all kinds of different things. So that's the way I'm going to spell it for right now. If you see it slightly different on a test, again, I apologize because it's just not that big of a deal as far as I'm concerned, exactly how he spells it. But there are lots of different ways. Okay, so his dates are 780 to 850. He used Hindu numerals, so the Hindu Arabic numbers for sure. We see that in his writing. So one of the first ones that we see actually writing things and doing some more modernized math and using these numbers to do it. So we know for a fact that he used it, and he used the place values, and he used 0. So this is awesome for us. In his writings, he talked about the concept of nothing, which seems like whatever, but back then, 0 as a placeholder, again, kind of a novel concept. Or, for instance, I could write, if I wanted to say 103 instead of 1 and 3. And maybe I leave just a little bit of a gap in there to talk about maybe there's a place value in there. But instead, I don't have to do that. It's not left up to interpretation the way the Babylonians were for us. Really can be confusing. Instead, it is very clear to us whenever we see 103 in base 10 numbers. It's very clear exactly what is meant by that. I have one group of 100, I have 0 tens, and I have 3 ones. So we are very clear about what that means. So in his writing, he did adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing, which is awesome. because he showed us how that should be done. Okay, methods for doing all of these operations using our new Hindu Arabic numbers and place values. So he did that. He had halving and doubling, so I don't know, maybe that's a little bit of a nod to the Egyptians and some of the stuff that he saw in the writings. And he saw square roots. So really interesting stuff that he was working on. His book that the first book, major book that he published or put out there that's really important to us that we're going to study is called Algorithmi. Algorithmi, Algorithmi. And in it he did astronomy and calendars and some geometry. So lots of ways of doing things, which is what algorithm normally means for us, right? An algorithm is a way of doing stuff. So he did those things, and he had maps of the world. So using latitude and longitude. I think there's only one T in latitude in the middle, latitude and longitude. So it's very, very clear that he had access to a lot of the Greek texts, and maybe he was pulling stuff that we have already studied. So very nice for us. Okay, so I'm going to push pause, and I'll start a new video because I think, a little bit more time for this next one. So I'll be right back.